I have, I'll try to go quickly. I have a science question and a law question, and they're directed toward both of you, but primarily one toward the other. The science question is primarily directed toward John. There's a considerable body of research. Men and women are different. Now, I know, vive la différence, but, medical science tells us that male and female brains are different, they work differently. Evolutionary biology tells us the male and female reproductive strategies are very different and conflicting. Sociology and psychology tell us that there are deep behavioral differences between men and women, whether those are social constructs or genetics, the fact is they're real. Do you not feel that it's appropriate for society to have a special, and I'll say the word favoritism, for heterosexual relations, because heterosexual pair bonds need to overcome that gap, and because they're useful for reproductive purposes, perpetuate the society, a struggle which does not, by definition, exist in same-sex relationships, because people in same-sex relationships have opted out of the struggle. So it's primarily toward you, but it's also for Maggie. Why is that research not more prominent in the argument? And I want to ask my law question so I can shut up and let them answer. And this is more directed toward Maggie, but I'd be interested in John's reaction. How would you react to this compromise, which is to go the European route and separate marriage and state? And because in Europe, you have to be, they call it marriage, but it's a civil marriage, and then you go to the church to get married religiously. What if the only thing isn't part of our problem that marriage and the state are combined here, and that's much of the argument. What if only thing the state could do was to authorize a civil union and marriage was put entirely into the church? Whether the church wanted to do same-sex or not would be up to the church. And the legal implications of marriage, the term, were taken out of the domain of the state. How would you react? Would you view that as a reasonable compromise or a defeat? And obviously I'd be interested in John's reaction to that as an approach to a compromise solution. So science question, law question.
Science question very quickly. I recognize that there are general differences between men and women. I'm gay, so that I would have had to have recognized that to have figured that part out. And maybe because of those differences, you might think that heterosexual couples need a little bit more help in relationship because you're talking about bridging a divide. But as someone who has been with my wonderful partner for 10 years, there are a lot of divides to be bridged there too. I can assure you. Even if we were to grant, for the sake of argument, that that heterosexual couples would need more help in supporting a commitment, it would be a fallacy to conclude from that therefore same-sex couples do not need help, or that they need some kind of different system of help, because many of the needs and challenges are the same about sticking together through thick and through thin, being unselfish, committing to the other, and so on. So I don't think that the differences are so vast that they call for some kind of different social system of support, and I'm not sure what that would look like. And then it's just sort of very quickly on the Europeans. I mean, I think that in a way we already have that system in our country, it's just people don't recognize it, that civil marriage and religious marriage are different things, but because here we tend to do them together, people don't recognize them as distinct even though they are.
On the reaction, I mean, I think that the claim that the reason we need marriage, we need to give special protection to opposite sex unions as marriages, is that by crossing the gender divide is harder, and therefore, those of us doomed to heterosexuality need more help. Kind of just founders on the evidence and misses the point. It founders on the evidence. We actually now have rather good data on the relative stability of opposite sex and same-sex relationships, even in countries which have full civil unions are marital equivalents, and in every single one of them, it looks like lesbians are the most likely to dissolve their relationships, gay men are the next, and opposite sex couples are, even in countries with very high divorce rates, more stable. My friend Steve Knock once told me in private, he said, that's easy, because everyone was very shocked when this data started coming in, because it's like, you gay guys were supposed to be dogs, but the women were all supposed to want monogamous, stable relationships.
I remember that thesis.
Yeah, and he said, well, it's because there's two women to become emotionally dissatisfied with a relationship. Doubles the odds. And so I don't think that's the reason. I actually think the reason is that the question, I mean, social institutions arise to address and solve problems that are social in nature. Otherwise, we leave it up to individuals to figure out their solution or not. And the reason why marriage arises over and over again and has its sort of basic shape as a sexual union of male and female with public and in developed systems legal norms connecting those two sexual partners to the children their union creates, is that this is a necessary task for the whole civilization. No, if I'm right about the consequences of gay marriage, it's not good for gay people either, because it's part of, I mean, we all, whether I marry or anyone else marries or not, we actually depend on, we need, and we're visibly failing at this great task of bringing together male and female to make and raise the next generation. My problem with there are a lot of problems with the way you describe separating marriage and state. First of all, it doesn't really solve, I mean, this is not a good idea. Privatizing marriage is not a good idea if the case I've just laid out is true, that marriage is essential to the common good. It's necessary for the whole society. We all have a stake in whether it succeeds or fails. Putting it off into the private sector is not going to be a move that, it's inconsistent with this view of marriage, and consistent with the ongoing development of the marriage as the pathway to a soulmate, which is a wonderful idea, but it's not clear why the government is involved in, you know, licensing your soulmate business. And I know there's sophisticated, I'm not saying this is John's argument, I'm just saying it's a common trend, not only among advocates of gay marriage, but about marriage generally. It's the way young people increasingly think about it. And the problem on the flip side is that you don't really solve the question of the government is still going to decide what is a civil union, and it's going to have to either design the rules around what makes sense for gay people or for straight people. It's presumably going to require people to recognize civil union as a status, so you're going to be requiring people to recognize, I mean, it may take some of the emotional valence out of the conflict.
Kicks the can down the road.
But you can see the main point. I mean, my view is that if government isn't involved in marriage for this core central task of bringing together mothers and fathers, that in fact we should privatize marriage. And I don't understand why government is telling you through civil unions that you can only have two people, you can't marry your sister. The whole logic of the enterprise falls apart, in my view.